Goedemorgen, everybody.
Goedemorgen.
This is episode 104 at Streets and Eats. And today on the podcast, we are taking you to the Netherlands and the beautiful flowers in springtime. We are celebrating the Tulip Festival with the Bloemencorso and all the activities that go along with that.
The Bloemencorso is the flower parade. We're doing the Dutch Tulip Festival because who brought tulips to the world? The Netherlands, right?
The Netherlands, for sure.
But where did they first come from?
That's the trivia question.
I have the trivia question today, and here's the thing. I could ask, where did tulips originate?
And I would get it.
And he would get it.
Actually, so I'm not sure that we're correct on that.
We are correct because I looked it up.
Okay.
And they came from Turkey, and they're all from Central Asia as a general rule. And of course, the Turks then gave the tulips to the Dutch as a gift, and then the Dutch brought tulips to the world.
Well, it's important to remember that when we say Turkey in the 17th century, we're talking the Ottoman Empire, which was huge. I mean, yeah, it spread it way into Central Asia.
And
so who knows which rock the first tulip was growing behind, but it was definitely in the Ottoman Empire, and it is definitely attributed to the Turks. And I get the trivia question.
No, because that's not the question. Why? Because that would be the iconic question people would ask, maybe, and it's way too easy for us. Because we lived in Turkey. And you can find, the Turks do love tulips.
Oh,
and in fact, in April, the same time as the Dutch Tulip Festival, you can go to Istanbul and they have tulips in all the flower beds.
And they're very proud of their tulips.
They're very proud of them.
Rightfully so.
They're all over the Hagia Sophia area, the Sultan Ahmed, the Blue Mosque. And they use tulips. They're such a important flower in Turkish culture that they use them in much of their art and their beautiful tiles. But that's another post.
Sure.
But at any rate, they did gift them to the Netherlands, and it went from there. As tulips are gaining popularity in the Netherlands and all over the world, there became this variety. A new tulip came on the scene that basically was not solid. It had stripes. It was called a Gregi tulip because it's named after the whole Turkmenistan, Turkish celebration of tulips. But it was a special tulip that just all of a sudden showed up. How did they come up with this striped tulip variety?
Well, I believe I know this answer.
Oh, well, there you go. He's going to get one right.
We'll see. I think I know this answer because we went to this really cool little museum,
which we're going to talk about because you should go there too.
In Lisa, the Black Tulip Museum, and I was reading there about the different strains, and it's called the Black Tulip Museum, but in fact, there weren't black tulips for a very, very long time, even though there were legends of black tulips.
That's where it came from, was the legend.
Straying from the point. I believe what I discovered about stripes and flame effects and things like that was that they were actually a disease in the plant.
A virus. And how was this virus spread?
I'm going to say bees.
Close. Aphids.
Aphids. Ooh, nasty.
I mean, you got it right. I guess having that experience of going to a museum
recently.
A couple of days ago.
Haven't had a chance to forget it or anything.
Anyway, that's okay. It's something that I didn't know, and I thought it was pretty interesting stuff. And, you know, I find in this world post-COVID of viruses, and we're kind of heightened to all the things that viruses can do that are negative.
Right.
But there are also things viruses can do that are positive.
That's for sure.
And that's hard to remember.
Yeah.
So I thought this was a positive virus explanation. Take that as you will.
I like that. So, but what I don't know from that point on, it's like they must have bred.
Oh, now because they were so popular, they've created a way to simulate that in the hybrid.
Without the viruses.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It is. I mean, I don't know all the science behind it, but...
Neither do I.
It doesn't matter. It's pretty cool.
So you mentioned that tulips came to Holland via Turkey as a gift. And that alone is pretty fascinating history. But once it came to Holland, the Dutch are master gardeners. At that time, they were the merchants to the world.
They were.
The Dutch East Indies, I mean, their navy spread around the known world at that time.
Doing some good and some not so good.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, the way everybody was back then. So they had distribution. They
down
had
to a T.
Marketing. They had everything down to a T. I mean, they were the rulers of the world at the time.
Well, and the other thing that's really interesting about the Dutch growing tulips is this is also around the same time that they were reclaiming a lot of land and they were building dikes. Right. And when you built the dikes, you'd have to move. You wanted that sand for the dikes, but you wanted that other soil to go somewhere else. And that soil turned out to be great tulip growing soil. Right. Great flower growing soil.
Which that part was just kind of a stroke.
So that was just sort of, exactly, serendipitous. Yeah. But I thought that was interesting all the same.
But then the tulip, really blossomed, if you will. Throughout Europe, especially. And it became, so important that you had tulips in the court when people were visiting and all that kind of stuff. So they became quite expensive. And
so expensive that you could either have tulips in your house or you could buy a house.
Oh, you can't do both.
Right. Sure, the people who could afford tulips could do both. But most people could not afford tulips because it was the cost of a house. Yeah. I think that's pretty interesting. Maybe I should make that the trivia question.
That was a good one. I would not.
Darn it!
So eventually, of course, that bubble burst, like all bubbles burst.
I don't know. I tell you what, we just went to the Tulip Festival this past weekend, along with, a couple million of our friends.
It seemed like a million.
No, there's no seeming. There's millions of people that go to the Netherlands. It is the highest tourist season throughout the year for the Netherlands because the tulips are that popular. And they have built museums and experiences and gardens and tours and I don't know, you name it, they've got it, and it's all tulip.
All the time.
Not all the time, basically in April. And that's actually one of the things we'll go over. But the thing is, not only did they market it to begin with and make a fortune, they've continued to adapt to the times and continue making a fortune off of flowers. Yeah. I think that's pretty impressive, personally.
Yeah. I mean, they're not like organic gold anymore, but they are a very, very
lucrative
business for the farmers of the Netherlands.
Well, and of course, as all tourism is, that then translates into the people who are selling souvenirs, who are providing food, who are, we paid for the gas, for the car. So all of those things. I mean, tourism, and in this case, tulip tourism, mighty profitable.
Yeah.
So tulips in the Netherlands. First of all, there's this big thing about saying Holland or saying the Netherlands. Oh, yeah. Now, we have lived in the Netherlands, and we did not live in Holland because Holland really is...
It's like a province?
A province, or a couple of provinces. South Holland. And
a region.
It's regional. But here's the thing. I don't think that... Some people care about terminology, and I think words are important, and I think that we should call it the Netherlands. But if you slip and call it Holland, I think you're okay. And especially when you're talking about the tulips, because the majority of the tulip tourism is in the province, the area of Holland. But still, just remember that the country really is the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Anyway, I got off track there.
Yeah, you
the
did.
Tulip Festival.
Tulip Festival.
So people come to the Netherlands during the Tulip Festival time, and the time is really late March, early April through the end of April. So I would say if you go to the Netherlands during April, more than likely you should be able to find some tulip fields, and you're going to see the hype around the tulips. Outside of April, earlier they have daffodils, later they have other things like dahlias. I mean, they're still about flowers, and of course other Dutch things like cheese and windmills and that kind of stuff. But the tulip time is
April.
Probably the best
March.
is mid-April to the end of April. That's probably the ultimate time. But it's all weather related. So it really depends on how cold it's been, how cold it is, how much rain there's been. So, that's always something that you can't just say, okay, I'm going in 2027 and I'm going in April and I'm going to go the second week because that's mid-April.
That's when the flowers
and
are going to be the
expect
best.
to see them. So you really need to do your research and be up to date on what the weather's been like and when they're predicting that the flowers will be out. And I think that's just very key. It goes the same when you're talking about Japanese cherry blossoms.
Oh, yeah, of course.
All those things that are very weather dependent. Do your research, and make sure
Maybe
you're
not
doing
book
it
too
right.
far in advance. 2 or 3
Maybe
years
not.
in advance. I don't know.
And the other thing is people go to Amsterdam. Well, Amsterdam is a beautiful city and there's lots to do there. And
There's gardens.
there are some gardens.
botanical
And of
gardens.
course they're selling tulip bulbs. And there's a tulip museum. And there are tulip related things because tulips are big business. But Amsterdam is not the place you go for the Tulip Festival.
No. You have to go to the Bollenstreek region, which is basically from Noordwijk on the sea up along in the middle of just off the coast, I guess, through Lize and a couple other villages, and then all the way up to Haarlem. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the route that the Bloemen Corso, the parade, takes. 44 kilometers?
42 kilometers, yeah.
That's a lot. I don't know if it is the longest parade in the world, but that's a long parade.
And it takes all day long.
Yeah.
All day long. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody's there all day. We'll explain that later, but it is an all-day affair. And, of course, there's lots of things to go along with the Tulip Festival. The other thing to note is that there are other places in the Netherlands to see tulips. We have not actually been to them, but there's Flevoland, there's Annapolana, there's lots of places. And again, this is something that it really depends on what you're interested in. And we'll touch upon all the different kinds of things that you can do during the Tulip Festival and tulip-related types of activities. So you really want to make a good plan. And I want to point out that we saw a lot of tours.
Oh, yeah.
There might be, and I mean, I don't have a number.
No way.
But if there's less than 1,000 tours, I would be shocked. And overwhelming.
Over the course of the weekend of the 5-day Tulip Festival.
Overwhelming.
For sure. Probably that whole week, there's tours going on.
And I personally don't think a tour is necessary.
No, especially if you have your own vehicle. That's the best way to get there, I think. It's not the only way to get there.
No, well, public transportation in the Netherlands is
beautiful.
Stellar.
Yeah.
Stellar. It's cheap, clean, and
it will take you almost everywhere in the country.
And it happens all the time. Yeah. I mean, it's not like, like where we live right now. Yeah. We can't travel on the weekend. We can't travel after 6 p.m. But that's not true in the Netherlands. We used to put our teenagers on the bus, and they would go off to wherever. And like they went to Efteling and they went to Amsterdam and they went all these places on their own with their friends because we knew they could get there by public transportation and they could get back. Yeah. And we weren't worried about them because it was safe. And so I think that for visitors who've even never been to the Netherlands before, keep in mind 2 things. Public transportation, easy peasy. Jeez. And 2, every single person, regardless of age, speaks English.
Oh yeah, it's true.
Every single person.
Very good English. You'll never have a hard time getting help.
Every single person. I think this is just my experience of all the countries we've traveled to, well over 90 countries together. Of all of them, the Netherlands speaks the best English ubiquitously in their country.
I would say even better than England, Ireland, Scotland.
Well, I don't know.
Northern Ireland.
Well, we did get off a plane once in Glasgow and couldn't understand how to get our rental car because we couldn't speak English to them.
Yeah, that's more accent related than anything else.
It was, but my point is, I've understood every single Dutch person.
Yeah, they have great accents.
Always.
It's true.
So, I don't know. No, the Glaswegians, no. They have quite the accent. So, take that as it may. It's fun. But you may not be able to understand things like, what's your name?
Yeah.
Just saying.
So if you're driving there, you have the extra opportunity of just getting out and tooling around through the farmlands. you'll see a lot more tulips that way that aren't like surrounded by tour buses and people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great way to go. Then you can also go out to the coast and walk on the beach because it's right there.
Well, there's tons to do in the Netherlands.
Explore the little villages. Yeah.
I mean, the villages are beautiful. The architecture is stunning. The farms are gorgeous. The windmills are everywhere. And we used to live right next door to a windmill when we lived in the Netherlands. There's a lot to do. And if you go on a tulip tour, I mean, if that's the way you're going to do it, fine. We're not knocking it, but you're going to do the same thing that everybody else has done if you go on a tour. You're going to go to Keukenhof, the gardens, which is really Keukenhof, by the way. And this year was its 75th anniversary.
That's right.
And it's a great garden. But everybody, it's crowded. There's a lot of people there, especially during this.
If you have your own car, then you can like pick and choose the time that you go and maybe avoid some of those crowds.
Yeah. So
or public transportation, the same thing.
The one way that people like to do the tulips is they rent bikes. And the Dutch are big into bikes. Everywhere you go, you're going to see bike parking lots. You're going to see rental bikes. You're going to see electric bikes, every kind of bike, everywhere, all the time. So you can do that. And it's flat. And that 42 kilometers that Jim was talking about, we're only talking 3 kilometers from this town to this town. And in between, there are tulip fields. So it's very doable. Whether you do 10 kilometers or you do the whole 42 kilometers, you're going to see lots and do lots. Again, you just want to map out your course. And
there's bike paths throughout the entire country.
Very well signed
in cities, outside of the cities. And if you're going to rent a bike, which is an excellent idea, first thing you're going to want to do is go to a VVV, a tourism board office, and pick up the flower bike route maps and take them along with you. That way you won't miss anything.
Yeah, there's lots to do. So biking is a good way to do it. Traveling in your own car is a good way to do it. Or even taking public transportation in between the areas. For example, if you were to go to Keukenhof, it's the nearest train station is Sassenheim. And then from Sassenheim, you've got to make your way to Lisa, to the actual Keukenhof. But it's easy to do. It's just a bus ride.
It's a public bus that takes you right there from the station.
Like right there.
Especially during that season.
Exactly. I mean, you're not going to have any trouble getting around. Whether you want to rent a car or not is up to you. But driving in the Netherlands is relatively easy. There are a few.
There are challenges. One of them we just talked about is the bicycles and the bicycle paths everywhere. So as you're entering a circle, you've got to have your head on a swivel. And it's a good idea to have 2 heads on a swivel, looking for bikes and pedestrians entering the circle or crossing the road in front of you. And you have to be aware of who has the priority, the right of way going into the circle.
Well, I think the general rule is this. Unless you can actually see otherwise, like sometimes there's a traffic light for the bikes or whatever, unless you absolutely know that they don't have the right of way, you give it to them.
It's certainly not going to hurt. It might piss off the people behind you, but everybody's pretty patient there.
Especially during that time, because you know what? They like that money.
And most of the people who are touring around the area are doing the same exact thing.
Exactly.
So yeah, but that's probably the biggest challenge of driving in the Netherlands. Other than that, the pace is slow and calm. Everybody's a very good driver. It's definitely one of the easiest countries to drive in, except for the one thing about watching out for bikes coming
and
giving them the right of way.
They do have a lot of cameras for speeding.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Keep to the speed that you're supposed to.
And they're triggered on the speed limit. They're not like in America. You can go 10 miles over the speed limit and be pretty safe. That's not true in most of Europe, but definitely in the Netherlands.
That's right. Okay, so getting around is really, really easy. And then the other thing you want to do is figure out what are you going to wear? What are you going to pack?
We always say layer.
We always say layer, and it's never more true than during April in the Netherlands. Because I'm going to give you an example. On Sunday, we went to the parade on Saturday, which was freezing.
Can I just say, I was wearing...
Your parka?
A parka, a jacket, a long sleeve shirt, and a t-shirt.
And we had blankets.
And a blanket.
And hats. Did
Yeah.
you mention hats? We were cold. I mean, I have pictures of it. You'll see it. And it was so cold. So don't think that you can leave your winter clothes at home.
Oh, no.
Bring them. But you want to layer because in the same day on Sunday, we had sun.
Yeah.
And we're like, whoa, basking in the sun.
Feels so
It's
good.
so nice. 10 minutes later, it's pouring down rain. And then about an hour later, guess what?
A little bit of snow.
We had snow. So the problem is, and sometimes we've gone to the Netherlands, well, we live there. So sometimes, yeah, it's gorgeous for 2 or 3 days in a row. But I'm going to say that's the exception rather than the rule. It's usually at least chilly. Yeah. At the very least, it's chilly with like smattering of rain.
And the wind starts blowing and it really drops the temperature quick. And you want to be ready for that. So a windbreaker, yeah.
Layers.
Something to cover your ears.
And bring your warm clothes. And maybe bring an umbrella. Although the umbrellas don't really work that well because the wind is so high. Bring a good hat, a rain hat.
Yeah.
You know, a hoodie. What do you call those things? A hood.
A hood on your
Whatever.
jacket.
Anyway, that works the best. Plus, it also keeps the wind off of you because it is cold.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I would pack. And also the other thing with that is with rain, you want some good shoes. You're going to be doing quite a bit of walking regardless of what you do.
You want to stay dry.
And you want them to be. You don't want to bring like suede boots. Uggs are a no-no because they're going to get wet. They're going to get soaked in.
And you might be actually walking out in the fields a little bit. We're not recommending that you go into the flower beds.
Don't go into the fields.
But as you walk to the flower beds, you're going to be walking through dirt, grass, puddles, things like that. So you got to be ready for that.
Wellies or garden boots are always a good thing to bring. They're not the most gorgeous and maybe they take up a little room in your suitcase, but you know what? They're versatile.
Yeah.
Our grandson loves them because then he can pop in any puddles he wants. And we let him because you know what? It's fun.
Because it's fun. So it's always a good idea to bring like an extra pair of socks or two in your day pack.
Yeah, for sure. And you can change them in the car or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, so packing is not going to be, this isn't going to be the trip where you can probably get away with as little as possible unless you want to put a lot on the plane and, do the peeling off on the plane.
Sure.
Because you definitely want to have your winter coat available to you and something lighter underneath it, at least a fleece or a raincoat or something. Okay. And then, so let's talk about the things that you can do during the Tulip Festival.
Yeah.
There are lots of activities during this time. And really, the Tulip Festival itself goes a lot longer than the Blumenkorso, the flower parade
Just the parade
weekend.
on Saturday, yeah.
But that's probably the best time to go because so much culminates during that weekend. If you have time to stay before or stay after, there's plenty of other things to do. But that weekend, I think, is the best weekend. And that's the weekend we just came back from.
Yeah.
And we had a blast. And we did a lot.
Yeah. My favorite thing that we got to do this time was you can do a behind the scenes where you go into the huge covered area where they're putting the floats together for the parade. And you can,
which is always cool anyway, right? To see how things are made.
Yeah. Now, we went on Friday. Floats were basically done.
They were doing light checks and toe checks, and there were a couple
last minute stuff.
Couple of let's fill in a hole here, that kind of thing. But they were
built.
They were built. And if I were going to go next year, if I were going again, I probably would go not Wednesday morning. They start on Wednesday, so Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday are the days that you can do the behind the scenes because it's a 3-day thing. And we talked to a man there who's been doing it for the last 22 years, all 3 days. For 22 years. Wow. But anyway, so you can do it Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I wouldn't go first thing Wednesday morning. To me, that just seems like it would be a time when they're like...
Maybe not enough going on?
Not quite enough going on. They're getting organized. Maybe they're parking the float. They're getting their stuff in there. But I think probably by Wednesday afternoon, Thursday morning... I think that's going to be the height of the activity. And I would shoot for that if I were going again. And that's just something to keep in mind. For sure. And like I said, there's plenty to do in the area. So when you're done doing that, which it took us, I think we were there maybe an hour and a half. Mm-hmm. But the floats were already done.
Yeah.
If they had been working on them more, I think we would have spent more time there. Yeah.
Because it would have been fascinating to see them putting all the different pieces into different places. And, we could talk a little bit about the floats at this point. They're flower floats, but basically anything organic is on the table.
That's true.
There was one float that had bananas on it.
Well, I mean, that was because it was
for elephants.
Yeah. But the point is, anything that they grow is fair game. And I really enjoyed how they used the different flowers for different textures. So one of the floats was a hedgehog. And my favorite thing about that was the back of the hedgehog was just tulip bulbs. It wasn't actual blooming flowers. And then it had a few of those like white, what do you call those, grasses kind of things that come out of them.
Grasses.
That are like the spikes and stuff. I thought it was so well done. I mean, who doesn't love a hedgehog anyway? But it was so well done. And I love that whole artistry of figuring out the different textures and putting them in there. Plus I have a couple of photos of it of, if this area is pink, all the different pink flowers they have. Or if this one's orange, or if this is purple. It was just amazing to me that they weren't just hyacinths. Most of the flowers they're using are hyacinths because they're easy to...
Don't ask me about flower names.
Yeah, but most of them are hyacinths. But they use all the other kinds of varieties for...
Everything.
Well, various things.
Whatever they need, yeah. Just the variety of flowers and vegetation being used is really incredible on the floats. And also the cars, when they decorate the cars and the trucks and everything. It's quite a support team for a 42-kilometer parade. So anybody or any vehicle that's part of that support team is going to be decorated. So that includes like the tractors. If there's a problem and they need to tow somebody, they've got a tractor available. And it's decked out in flowers and it's beautiful. But the behind the scenes, I think, really gets you up close and personal with the floats that as they're driving by in the parade, you're not going to get.
You definitely are. And in fact, I think when you're in the parade, I mean, you're like, ooh, that's beautiful. But I don't think you really see everything.
You don't really get the detail.
Because it's a 3D sculpture.
Yeah.
So if you're on the right side of the road, you're not seeing the left side of the road.
That's right.
You might see the front, you might see the back, but I guarantee you're missing something. So I think there are a couple different ways that you get to see the floats up front. And this is part of the schedule that we were talking about. So there's the behind the scenes. There's also the Friday night parade. There's a light parade that goes out of Noordwijkerhout. We did not go to it because it starts at 9 o'clock at night.
It's a little too late for us sometimes.
And I'm just dead to the world by 9 o'clock at night. It was my goal. I didn't make it. Oops.
Yeah.
But then as it turns out, we got to see them in different ways. Then there's the parade. And then at the end of the parade, the very last place they go is Haarlem.
Yeah.
And they stay in Haarlem, I don't know how long, but long enough that you can wander around there and you can really get up close and personal to the floats as well there. With lots of other people, of course. There's nothing you're going to do that's just you.
No.
But you then can see, the whole float, everything that's going on. And I think that's kind of cool. So there are different ways to see it.
Now, at that point, they've traversed the entire 42 kilometers of the parade route through the wind, through the rain, through the weather.
So they're not going to be in the best shape.
So they may not be pristine, but they do a pretty good job of keeping the floats up as they go. They bring lots of flowers and lots of pins so they can keep things looking pretty good. So yeah, that's a really good tip, actually. Head to Haarlem afterwards.
And the other thing that you do, so the big parade is on Saturday, and we'll go into more depth about that. You got to pick where you're going to watch it, blah, blah, blah. And then the other thing that you can go see, and this is also in Noordwijkerhout, so you can do it the same day as you do the light thing or whatever, the light parade, is they have what they call Die mooiste file de Nederlands. And that is the most beautiful traffic jam of the Netherlands. And they do this every year. And it's what Jim was talking about. They have, all of these are contests. Did you know that?
Oh, yeah.
The floats are contests. Like they had a children's parade. It's a contest. They have the traffic jam, which is cars and trucks and buses and you name it, decorated with flowers. That's a contest. They're all contests. So basically in Noordwijkerhout along I think it was the Wilhelmina Boulevard.
Strand or whatever.
Which is right on the beach. basically. They have all of these cars that are completely decked out in these elaborate flower bouquets, some with themes, some with a little tweaky joke here or a Dutch themed here or whatever. It's a contest so that, they're doing really cool things. I don't think there was as many as they had kind of promised when we went to see it.
Right.
Because the weather was so bad this past weekend.
So I think they just had like the top.
I don't know which ones they had. They had some in the hall, like Jim was saying, of behind the scenes. I don't know if they're always there because I think that Demoiste takes precedence.
Yeah, and I think that for the cars themselves, I think a lot of that is on the people who are the sponsors from the cars.
Oh, they're all
sponsored. They don't necessarily need to go to the big hall to put that stuff together. Probably in a garage would do. So, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so that's something that you can do. Also, there's the flower mosaics, and we'll talk a little bit more about the flower mosaics. And the flower mosaics basically are art pieces made out, again, of hyacinths. And so it's during hyacinth season. And some are as early as, in Lisa, it was the whole week prior to the parade.
Right.
And then some go through the parade or start the parade weekend and go the next week. There are various dates, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, but basically you have to kind of look up each town to find out when theirs is.
It's kind of hard to get that information.
It's a little bit more difficult to get that information, but we'll give you some clues on our show notes so you can take a look at that.
But the good thing is, again, in Noordwijkerhout, where the Witte Kerk, an old Dutch white church in the center of the village, that's one of the places where over the weekend they'll display some of those mosaics.
Well, theirs from their town.
Oh, okay.
Their town. That was their town's mosaic.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. I thought it was like from other places too.
No, that was from their town. So each community does their own thing. And some communities kind of do it in tandem. So you can go to a couple of different communities. It changes every year. It depends on the volunteers because all of these people are volunteers. And it just changes. It's all dependent on what the locals want to do and how much time they have and what the weather's been like and, all that kind of stuff. So how much money they have. Lots of different things. All right. Well, the big event.
The parade.
Is the parade itself. The flower parade. The Bloemencorso, which means flower parade. Yeah.
And, okay, so we talked about getting to the area, right?
Well, the first time we went, we did it the easy way. We would do it the way a lot of people might do it. Is we just went online and we booked a grandstand seat in Sassenheim.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I thought was a pretty good idea.
It seemed like it at the time.
And we enjoyed it, and we were sitting down through the parade, and it was a beautiful day. It was much nicer than this past weekend. But what we noticed was, on this 42-kilometer length of parade, which really isn't the full... you're not going to go out in the middle of two towns, perhaps, and stand, because it might not be the same. But in each town along the parade, there's plenty of places to put your...
Put out a seat.
Like, we had our...
Right on the edge of the road.
Yeah.
Be right up close and personal. Yeah, the grandstands are, to begin with, they're built back off the road quite a bit. And then you're in a plastic seat in bleachers, basically. And so
you can't really move around them.
So you've got people in front of you, you got people behind you. And yeah, if you wanted to get up and take a picture, it's kind of impossible. So we discovered it's probably not the best way to do it. You do have a seat, so if you're limited on what you're carrying...
and I think if you're coming from far away, if you're flying into the Netherlands just to do the Tulip Festival, at least you have a seat.
Yeah.
As you get up in age, especially, we can attest to this. It's kind of nice to have a chair. Otherwise, you're going to be standing for, probably 3 hours.
I need a chair.
So it really depends on what's important to you and what sources you have available to you. But we, as people who live close enough to bring our own chairs, think that was the best way to do it. And depending on, it's probably cheaper, to be honest, to rent a car, do your own thing, than it is, and go buy 2 lawn chairs. No, honestly. Because the grandstand seats run from, I think they're 35 up.
Yeah.
35 euros up. You can buy a chair for 10.
And if you don't have your own car, you're going to have to get to the grandstand, which means you're going to sign up for a tour or, of course, public transportation. That was the other issue, though. Even with the grandstands, we still had to find parking. Yeah. And parking along the Blumenkorse is challenging. There are a lot of parking lots. Some of them are maybe 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers from a good place to be sitting. So that's quite a hike. Other ones are closer to inside the town, but now you're inside the parade route, and it can be very difficult to leave after the parade's gone through that town.
So you have to have all these things in your head about where you're going to park and how far away it is and what time you need to get there. On the Tulip Festival website, they suggest an hour before. And I have to say, we got there 2 hours before.
We did.
And there were plenty of people 2 hours before. And we got a good parking space. But if we'd waited till an hour before, we would definitely not have. So I think 2 hours is a better time frame, no matter where you park. And that's what I'm saying. You're going to be standing for probably at least 3 hours.
Yeah. So
unless you bring a chair.
Bring a chair.
We
spent a good amount of time the day before just driving through the different villages that the parade goes through and looking, at
what
was on offer for different areas if we wanted to go there to watch the parade. And I think we really hit on one of the best ones in Voorhout. Now, if you don't have public transportation, the grandstand area, which is, you want to be near the grandstand area for sure, because that's where the floats are going to stop for a minute. That's where the bands are going to be playing songs, that sort of thing. So you do want to be in that area. And in Voorhout, that area is right
where the train station is.
Where the train station is. So if you don't have a car,
it's perfect.
It's perfect. You've got public transportation directly to a great place to sit or stand. And actually, at that point, you don't. I mean, if you get there later, you're going to be further back from the road, but we like to be right on the front of the road. But the other thing to that was there was a huge park and ride parking lot right there as well.
For free.
That had access in and out even after the roads closed for the parade.
We did get bussed in because we had our little car, our little Volkswagen Caddy, right smack in them. Here's a bus, here's a bus, here's a bus, here's some cars over here, here's a bus. And we were like, okay, so we're not going to get in and get out until they've loaded up. But you know what? They loaded up
pretty quick.
Really fast.
Not sure where they were heading, but maybe to the next town or a couple of towns
to Kuchenhof.
Or to Kuchenhof or to a Bold manufacturing plant or the gardens. Yeah, who knows?
Or something other.
But there was quite a few buses there. And it was funny because we got there before most of the buses, most of the people, and we've pre-positioned our parking so that we would have easy access out. But we blew that. We had no idea where the buses were going to be. And they pretty much just jammed the buses in everywhere.
And I would say that after we got to the car after the parade, I mean, we only waited maybe 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah. Maybe. So who cares? It was a piece of cake. It was a good way. So Voorhout we worked it out for us. Voorhout worked out really, really well. We really enjoyed the whole area around Sassenheim. But remember, the parade leaves at 7 in the morning, 7:45 in the morning. I think the very first stop is 8 o'clock or something.
Yeah.
And then it goes all the way. I mean, it's going through multiple towns, and it ends in the evening. So another thing that you kind of have to take in consideration is, do you want to do it early and get it over with and have the rest of the day? Or would you rather do it later in the afternoon? It's warmer probably. But also, the people might be tired if they're in the parade. I mean, you have to kind of take all these and what is interesting to you and maybe where your hotel is and how you're getting there. There's so many little things. Like, we can't give you the right combination. It's really going to be so independent on what is important to you.
Yeah. I do know that Voorhout works out pretty good for a lot of different reasons. And, at the same time, there was an excellent bakery right across the street. I was just thinking that.
That was like one of the best boons.
With fresh coffee. And it was right on the edge of the town center. So you could walk into town and explore the town for a little bit, either before or after the parade.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty little town. So
yeah,
that was a good option. The Sassenheim one that we went to before was where we were at in the grandstands was a little bit out of town.
It was.
And there wasn't really anything else to do in the area. So,
Not without a long walk.
Yeah.
And actually, it was a longer walk for the parking, too.
It was definitely.
A much longer walk. And to be honest, we didn't really go much further than that because for us,
Well, we're
we
morning
wanted...
people.
Yeah, we're morning people. So we wanted to get there and get it done and do the morning thing and then have the afternoon to sort of tool around and do other stuff. I think that really is depending on the kind of person you are. I think, and actually, the weather was so bad, so cold, that maybe waiting till afternoon might have been better this time. I don't know. It was
I don't
cold.
think it got any better that day.
It was so cold.
I think it hit the high around 9 a.m. and was just cruddy from that point forward.
Anyway.
But that's just the...
So then so kind of like each town has their little bits and pieces that they do in their town. Maybe they have a special band that's only going to play during their town. A lot of them have children's parades that start before the parade, but that's only children in their town. They don't take their children to all the different ones. Yeah. And so like in Voorhout, they had a children's parade ahead of time. And oh my goodness, that may have been part of my favorite parts because here's all these. Well, first of all, the families are so into it. They're proudly walking by their creations that their kids are riding, and they rode on scooters and little toy tractors and lots of bicycles, of course, and baby carriages. And I mean, some were extremely elaborate with these arcs of flowers, and some were just simple little.
Less is more.
Here's my basket filled with flowers. I mean, it was so cute. Very so cute. Wonderful. So that was really nice. And then after that, they have, at the beginning, everywhere, they have where they're collecting money for people. You don't have to pay for the parade. It's free.
Right.
But, I mean, you can tell.
There's a lot of
how much
time, effort, and money that goes into preparing for this parade. So, yeah, when the donation box comes by, drop in some euros for sure. Yeah.
So there's that. And they call it the friendship part of the parade. And I don't know if they do this in every town, but in this town, I mean, Girl Scouts are such an important thing. They've always been in my life. And here come the Scouts, and they're selling, of all things, stroopwafel, which is such a Dutch, delicacy. So kind of like Girl Scouts cookies in the United States.
Right.
I mean, you get a little bag of stroopwafel, and there were different prices for different amounts. And it was all for donations for the Scouts. Of course I'm going to donate that. It was just, I think it's well done. Everything about it is just well done. And then like Jim said, you've got the cars in between, and you've got the tractor trailers, and you've got the tractors, and you've got all kinds of things that are also decorated.
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
As well as the floats. And then you've got people in costumes, and you've got marching bands, and I mean, it's a parade.
Yeah.
It's pretty inclusive. It's pretty Dutch. That you can tell they're really celebrating their heritage. I think, and we've done it twice now, and I totally believe it's one of the best things we do in the Netherlands.
Oh, yeah,
it's just really worth it.
It's definitely something everybody should do.
Some of the other things that we did, like Jim said, we went to Noordwijkerhout to the Witte Kerk, and there we did the mosaics around the church, and plus inside. One of the things we noticed on this trip more than any other trip is the churches have been kind of repurposed.
Repurposed, yeah.
I guess not as many people are going to church, and they're selling them off, and they're repurposing them.
I don't know, yeah.
But we've been to bookstores, and I saw co-working spaces. We went to a furniture store, and in Noordwijkerhout, I don't know if it's still used as a church or not.
I think it might be.
But they had a huge flower show inside.
Yeah, and they just took it over for the flower show inside. And
it was really cute. They had a flower bed. So they had this brass bed that had flowers in it. They had the heart shape. Let's look at through each other's eyes and whisper sweet nothings as someone is taking 15,000 pictures of us. And I don't know, other things. Just all kinds of flowers.
The whole church was packed with flowers. And as soon as you walked in the door, I mean... The aroma just smacks you in the face. Now, if you're somebody with flower allergies, you might want to stay away. But so beautiful. There was one display. I don't know if you saw this on one wall back in the back area where the altar would be. it was all daffodils
Underneath
under the window.
I have a picture of it.
Good. So daffodils, these yellow things, right? Everybody knows what a daffodil looks like. Sometimes they're white with the yellow end. I've never seen so many varieties of daffodils. In fact, when I first walked up, I didn't realize that this was a display of daffodils because they were so different. But then when you look close, you tell, oh yeah, they're all daffodils.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
They've taken, it's a science, I guess, right?
Right.
And then, of course, on the outside, in the courtyard or the yard of the church, were the Noordwijkerhout local mosaics. Now, what flower mosaics are is the same idea they've used for the floats, but they do it on a smaller canvas, and they're usually 2D
More
versus 3D. Yeah. Although,
but they're not all 2-dimensional, for sure.
Like, there was one where they were pouring beer. So they are somewhat 3D, but not anywhere near to the same.
Well, there was one that was a whole seat. That you could sit on for a picture.
Yeah, it's all about selfies.
But yeah, most of them are 2-dimensional, and it's a scene made with flowers, and it's just beautiful.
And we've seen everything because they're just so stunning, and it's amazing what they can do. And we've seen things like, famous people.
Van Gogh.
Artists. We have a picture of Van Gogh. They have bands. They have things that are popular with kids. Lots of Disney scenes.
Sure.
It runs the gamut, and it's just all kinds of artwork made by the local people, complete volunteers, just families. Sometimes, like, a couple families will get together for a few days and they make one. And we've run into that numerous times. And what's fun to go around to these different mosaics is that you can talk to the people. They're so proud of their work. You can see them just beaming with pride. And they're so willing to tell you how much time they spent on it, what they did. And do you know, this is something that could have also been the trivia question. Did you know that in 2021, the whole Bloomin' Corso cultural sort of event and the whole familial, like, localization and eating dinner after you work on the floats and all that, it's now an intangible UNESCO World Heritage Site.
It should be.
It really should be, because it is something that, it's hard to explain until you actually talk to some Dutch people, but they're so happy during this time. The wind was blowing. It was raining. It snowed a little bit.
Doesn't affect them at all.
And I didn't see one Dutch person that didn't have a smile on their face because they're just beaming with pride. It's just amazing to me.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So you have the mosaics. You have the flower beds that you can see all over the place. And you have some museums. Like, one of the museums we went to this time was called the Museum de Zwarte Tulip, or the Black Tulip. And we mentioned it already, but the Black Tulip was, for a while, it was just a legend. And then, of course, because of this legend, they tried and tried and tried
it's kind of a challenge thing, right?
Yeah, a black tulip. And the closest I can get is like a deep, deep, deep purple. But it is a beautiful flower.
It really is.
It doesn't last as long as some of the other ones because it's
pretty fragile.
It's hard. Yeah, it's fragile.
Yeah.
But the museum was quite nice. It was just 2 floors.
Pretty small. But it had, of course, beautiful paintings from local artists of the tulip fields and the workers in the fields, the sort of things that you'd expect to see. It had an excellent display of glass vases and vessels for not just for holding flowers, but also in the shapes of flowers and painted with flowers. Some of my favorites were Art Deco decorations from like the early 1900s. They were just incredible. They also have, I think, 400 like hand-drawn watercolor flower prints. So we're talking, pretty good size hand-painted, not really prints, but I guess they're prints. I don't know. I don't know the whole story there. But there's 400 of them, and they date back from the 1600s all the way up to the 1900s. And because they have so many, they can't display them all at once. So they just have a small room where they display about 50 of them. So you never know for sure what you're going to see when you go in. But they're all these beautiful drawings and paintings of different flowers.
We had, what do you call that? Scherenschnitte cuttings? Paper cutting. They had all kinds of tulip and art in every way.
Yeah.
On the second floor, they had the entire history of the tulip and how they have, became famous, and how the Dutch have then spread them throughout the world, and where they're more popular. And I guess Germany is one of the biggest importers of tulips.
Oh, wow.
I found that out by a huge margin. And then, so like on one wall, they have the list and they tell you different things with some illustrations and stuff. And then on the other wall, they have like old workshops, like how they grow the tulips, how they're cultivated, how they're picked, how they're put into pallets, how they're weighed and clean and shipped out. I mean, it's just really pretty fascinating, but yet it's not such a big museum that you're like, okay, enough already.
What am I reading next?
Yeah. So I thought it was exactly the right size. And then outside in the back, they have a beautiful garden. And one of the things that we haven't mentioned at all yet is, you know how you have those painted big things all around town?
Sure.
Different businesses will paint them. And in this case, all around the multiple towns, they have the tulip bulb. And so they'll have scenes on the tulip bulb.
And they're big.
And they're large, yeah.
They're quite large.
And they're in, business. And so there's one out in the back.
Different sponsors will have one, or in this case, the museum had one of the most beautiful ones.
So we did that. And there are other displays like that you can go to. Lisa had a market that was over the weekend for the same time as the Blumen Corso. We went to the market and they did sell some drupe or some licorice, and they sold some souvenirs.
Cheese,
and,
of course.
Of course, cheese. But they also sold
everything else.
Not t-shirts like souvenir t-shirts, but like clothes.
Clothing. It was a regular market.
It was a market. So they had that in Lisa. And just there's something going on everywhere so that you're not going to have time to get bored. There's plenty to do.
Lisa also has a really good pancake restaurant.
I was just about to mention.
We don't need to talk a lot about the food, but this is Streets and Eats. And when you go to the Netherlands, our recommendation is to find a good pancake house and have a savory pancake. They're about this big. They're pretty good size. We've got a recipe for Dutch pancakes on our website. So check it out. It'll tell you a lot more about the pancakes. But we will normally get a savory and then a sweet. So
I realized on this trip that we explained that, but people don't know what that means.
That's true.
So in our minds as Americans, we think the savory is your main course.
Well, first we think pancakes are breakfast.
Yeah, so that's the first
one thing you have
misnomer.
to get over. They're not breakfast.
They're not even open until like noon or whatever.
They're lunch and dinner.
Right. And the second thing is, yes, in America we have somewhat savory, but mostly sweet pancakes. But we also think savory is more of a main course, and then sweet is more of a dessert. No.
The pancake is the main course.
Period. Whether you have savory or you have sweet. So what we do, and then this is at the same time, we order one savory and we order one sweet, and we basically eat off both plates and have half and half. And they're delicious. They're just amazing. But I did realize that we're kind of explaining it wrong too. But anyway.
That's true.
And all the restaurants in the Netherlands are very good. So I don't think you have to worry about eating. The problem I have with the majority of restaurants they're not really serving true local dishes.
Yeah,
they become local dishes because that's what they serve.
We haven't found a lot of like really local celebrating the history of the food in the region in restaurants, which it seems like you would be able to find that, but you just don't really find that very much in the Netherlands.
You're actually more apt to find it in the fast food places because that's where they have like the bitterballen and the croquette and all the frikandel and all these things that are like little beer snacks or whatever.
Local snacks.
Another thing that's really popular in the Netherlands is Indonesian food, and they have the rice tafel and they have like bami noodles and
that all goes back to the 1600s and the Dutch East Indies bringing all these flavors and spices and food from around the world back to the country.
Yeah. So you'll find that everywhere, mostly in the Chinese restaurants and in the snack bars. And so it's almost like to get the most Dutch meals, you don't really go to a restaurant where you're going to pay, 30 euros per person. because there you're going to get spare ribs and a schnitzel and the kind of like European fare that you can get anywhere.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go to the snack bars, you're almost getting more Dutch food. So it kind of depends on what you're interested in. Not that the food in the restaurants is good. And
very good.
I think their design aesthetic, pretty much everywhere I've ever been, literally
very cozy,
is always
really
very
great
nice.
design, just like with the architecture, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
You will find a lot of the snacky things in restaurants on the appetizer menu. So I would say don't be afraid just to like eat off the appetizer menu and get bitterballen and vol au vent and things like that.
Anyway, we'll have a whole nother podcast on Dutch food. But just know that there is such a thing as Dutch food. And,
yes, there is.
It can be...
It's not just cheese, but also when you're walking around a village or a town and you see a cheese shop, go inside, take some samples and buy some cheese for later because Dutch cheese is some of the best in the world.
So good. So good. All right. And the other thing I just think we should mention is trying to find accommodations during the Tulip Festival.
Oh, yeah.
So we were saying for airfare and knowing exactly when to go, if you book a trip middle to late April, you're going to be okay. The Bloom and Corso is always the third weekend in April. So you can pretty much plan that out. And that's a safe time to come. At the same time that you book your tickets, book your accommodations.
Yeah, early.
Just know that the Netherlands is a very small country and their public transportation is very good. So you do not have to stay in Sassenheim. You do not have to stay in Noordwijk. You do not have to stay in one of those towns of the Bloom and Corso. Anywhere you are, you're going to be even Amsterdam's only a 40-minute drive. Yeah. Not that I suggest staying in Amsterdam. It's expensive during that time too. But you can stay in so many different places and get a really nice experience without staying right in the middle of the
There's
whole
not
region.
a lot of accommodations along that whole route.
Well, there's accommodations, but they fill up.
And they fill up
they're
quick.
Expensive because this is the highest tourist season.
Yeah. So actually on this trip, we stayed in Den Haag. Well, Scheveningen, which was a suburb of Den Haag right on the beach.
But I don't know if I would suggest that because...
It was a bit pricier there.
It was still pretty pricey, and the parking was outrageous because you're on the beach.
Because it's a beach area, yeah.
So it was 35 euros a day for parking. I find that unconscionable.
Which I didn't really expect going into it. I mean, I usually do pretty good research, but I never really saw a price for parking. I just saw that parking was available, and the price for the room that we got was very affordable, especially given the fact that we were booking it kind of late. And there wasn't a lot available anywhere else. So we just kind of sucked it up and said, okay, that's the way it is.
Live and learn.
Yeah.
At any rate, I think the key takeaway there is look for Airbnbs or hotels or something that are not necessarily in the Bulb region because everything's so close that you can easily get to it.
Yeah.
I think that's the key takeaway. Overall, I highly, highly, highly recommend going to the Bloom and Corso, the Flower Parade, and the Tulip Festival.
Seeing the tulips in April in the Netherlands is priceless.
It really is. It's such a wonderful thing. And it's a good time to go. It's pretty. And of course, there are plenty of other Dutch things to do on your trip, which we'll talk about in another podcast.
It's going to be a great time.
Dankjewel.
All right. Thanks for listening to this episode of Streets and Eats. If you liked what you heard, please show us some love. Hit the like button and leave us a review. Maybe even subscribe so you don't miss any future podcasts. Also, we'd love it if you joined us on our Facebook private group, Streets and Eats, where we just have an ongoing conversation about all things travel. Ciao for now.